the shelves of our untold history, one name echoes with an air of enigma and sumptuousness: Josiah Mwangi Kariuki. His life, a mixture of audacity and intrigue, it remains a testament to an era shrouded in mystery. Join me today as we unravel the lesser-known chapters of his extraordinary journey, secrets that have, until now, remained veiled in the shadows. Prepare to delve into the untold history of a man whose existence defied the ordinary and courted the spectacular. I am Jeph. If you have not already, please subscribe to our channel. If you have, you are awesome. Before we dive into the spectacle of his life and death, let us first uncover a few little-known facets that truly define JM Kariuki. These elements, often overshadowed by his dramatic end, paint a fuller picture of the man behind the legend. Here are 5 things that I bet you didn't know about JM. 1. JM was a young businessman. Dude owned a hotel in Nakuru when he was 23 years old. He might have also started the first social media platform in his hotel. He used to buy the day's newspaper and read for the people during breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He'd stand on the middle table, clear his throat, and call the room to attention. Then he'd read the stories that he deemed newsworthy. The crowd would applaud the good news and frown at the bad news. They would have heated discussions on the trending topics, much like today's social media. That increased sales for his venture. Second thing, JM was very innovative. Dude might have started bicycle Uber half a century before Uber. He had bought bicycles, several of them, that he used to hire out around Nakuru. He charged the people 1 shilling for every hour. 3. JM was a freedom fighter. He took towards Muma, but he didn't go to the forest like the rest of the Mau Mau. Instead, he became a recruiter for the Mau Mau, a liaison officer. He mobilized food, boots, and ammunition. Some reports say that he even worked as a pimp. He would find prostitutes and supply them to government soldiers in exchange for rounds of ammunition. But he paid the price of the struggle with detention. 14 detention camps, 7 years from 1953 to 1960. The fourth thing is that JM was a member of Kenyatta's first government. He was private secretary to Kenyatta, a member of parliament, an assistant minister, and an insider of the inner circle for at least the years between 1963 and 1969. And the last thing about JM that you might not have known is that he was rich. No, rich might be an understatement. He was filthy rich. Well, that might also be an understatement because he was stinkingly rich. He had stables with horses, a symbol of his opulence. He cruised in a sleek Citroen. His wrists were adorned with executive timepieces. But the full story of his wealth, the details of his extravagant existence, will be exposed later in this episode. Yet, as remarkable as JM Kariuki's life was, his death proved to be even more sensational. Half a century later, his assassination continues to captivate and haunt the public consciousness, overshadowing the 46 years that he was alive. This moment of brutal finality has etched itself into the chronicles of history, sparking debates, conspiracy theories, and relentless speculation. So I will start with the end of his life and end with his life. I mean, the story of his death and then the story of his life. The family. Irrespective of who pulled the trigger, it is widely known that JM Kariuki was killed by the family. Okay, this is how the story goes. But you have to keep up, because first we have to go back to the 60s and glean over some history. The presidency. Kenyatta was the president and KANU was the only party. Kenyatta had a cabinet, but majority of his cabinet were from his tribe, Gikuyu, his trusted lieutenants who catered for his every whim. However, over time, an inner circle emerged, those who had easy access to Mzee, mainly those from Kiambu, Kiambaa, Gatondo, and Limuru. Back then, they were referred to as the Gatundu courtiers. Today, we know them as the Kiambu Mafia. But behind the scenes, there was the innermost circle surrounding the president, the elite group that wielded immense power, controlling the state house and the nation's resources. They were known simply as the family. Kenyatta sat at the head of the table, the patriarch of the family. On his right hand was his right-hand man, the gatekeeper to the family, Mbiyo Koinange, Kenyatta's brother-in-law. Behind him was the family consigliere, the advisor George Mohoho, another brother-in-law. Others on the family table were Bethel Gishaga, brother-in-law, Peter Muigai, Kenyatta's son, Margaret Kenyatta, Kenyatta's daughter, Joroge Mungai, and Gegi Muigai, who were nephews. The captains of the family operations were James Gishuru, the Minister for Finance, and Jackson Againe, the Minister for Lands. Others were James Njiru, Julius Kiano, Paul Ngei, and James Nyaga. The offsprings of the family are what we call today the dynasty. The family was the dominant faction in Kenya, exerting control over all administrative functions that allowed them to wield unchallenged authority. Their influence permeated every level of government, consolidating their power and shaping the nation's destiny from the State House. These alienated leaders from other areas such as Murang'a, Nyandarua, and Nyeri. So people like Charles Rubia from Murang'a, JM Kariuki from Nyeri were now backbenchers. But in the early 70s, a new populist movement was emerging. It was from within KANU. This was as a result of the displeasure that the population was having concerning the widening inequality. But the family was able to use the state house machinery to shatter the populist coalition. See, the family could easily blind the masses with Harambees, while the populist backbenchers could not, because they did not have the resources. Betrayal by the father. JM Kariuki's death was planned probably 4 years before it happened. The flamboyant lawmaker was supposed to die a natural death or as a victim of terrorism. The planners had one job: to leave no prints that would make the public suspect Kenyatta's government. See, when Kenyatta's regime killed Angwix Kodhek, it was because he was supposedly a communist. When it killed Tomboya, it was because he was too close to power and also a favorite of the West. But Kenyatta killing JM Kariuki, that would be like a father killing a son, the biggest betrayal. JM Kariuki was Kenyatta's favorite son from without the family. Let me explain. One day in 1942, Kariuki, a 13-year-old boy, was helping his mother sell local brew at her pub in Nakuru, where he grew up. They called it the Nubian Gin. Kariuki could overhear the army officials who frequented the drinking den talk about this mysterious man who was in the UK talking to the British about Kenya's freedom. He didn't think much about it then. He was only 13. But a few years later, in 1946, when Kariuki was in Standard 5, he became more aware of this man that people seemed to worship. He had been to the land of the colonizers for 15 years. He even spoke like them. Now he had come back with a message of redemption. This man was Kenyatta. When Kariuki heard that Kenyatta would be visiting Njoro one Sunday, He purported to attend and witness the mystery of these men. He and thousands of other people from Rift Valley thronged to Njoro to see and listen to Kenyatta. Kenyatta was charismatic, bold, flamboyant, sophisticated, and extroverted. He dressed elaborately, silver rings on his fingers, a leather jacket, and a beaded belt. His speech that day was a skill of showmanship, shrewd, fluent, and thought-provoking. Kenyatta was hard to forget. Kariuki, only 17 then, was impacted when he saw and heard Kenyatta speak. He immediately resolved to join the struggle and maybe meet Kenyatta again. And it happened. 15 years later, 1961. He would meet his idol face to face for the first time. After serving 7 years in detention and making his name across the country, Kariuki would write letters to Kenyatta, who was still detained. Kenyatta would reply, obviously impressed by this young revolutionary who seemed to be able to read the times. Kenyatta even invited Kariuki to Maralal, where he was being detained, and he requested Kariuki to bring things that a detainee could ask a free man. Beer, magazines, and even an earthenware refrigerator to keep the water cool because Maralal was particularly hot. Kariuki also carried pots for Mama Ngina, Kenyatta's fourth wife, who was helping to keep him calm. Kariuki literally worshipped Kenyatta, his adulation bordering on the obsessive, psychotic. It almost evokes the image of a devoted follower enraptured by a cult leader. In his book, Mau Mau Detainee of 1963, Kariuki extolled Kenyatta as our great leader, this noble man, our chosen leader. He continued with the praises in his book. He said that Kenyatta is more than any political party, greater than any Kenyan, greater than any African. Kenyatta knows no tribe, no race. He is human, yet wiser than any other human beings. No pipeline would ever be big enough to contain Kenyatta, nor is it possible to stamp greatness out of such a man. So Kenyatta rewarded Kariuki in 1963 when he formed the first government. Kariuki became Kenyatta's private secretary, so he became close to Kenyatta like a son. Mzee trusted JM so much that all delicate missions, like securing overseas training for the president's security men, was entrusted on JM. JM arranged to have the bodyguards and the people that Kenyatta chose to guard him to be trained overseas. JM was so personal with Mzee that he was with him from bed rise to dinner. Kariuki knew how many sugars Mzee needed in his tea. He knew how much whiskey he'd drink before he became drunk. JM knew the remedy for Mzee's hangover in the morning. He knew the jokes that Mzee liked and the people that Mzee didn't like. JM also spent days at Mzee's private residence in Ichaweri. Kariuki played with the young boy Uhuru, as his dad, Kenyatta, attended to matters in the office. Kariuki was so dear to Mzee. But as they say, it is familiarity that breeds contempt. Or as Kenyatta would say later, Kariuki had become a raging bull that didn't know which side to mount a cow. The more he stayed close to Mzee, he started realizing that after all, Kenyatta was a man and not a god. He was to be talked to, not worshipped. The more JM stayed around Mzee, the more he realized his human tendencies. He realized that Kenyatta went to the toilet like everyone else, and depending on what he had eaten, he'd stink the toilet like everyone else. He saw Kenyatta get sick, get angry, get disorderly, and even get late for appointments. Kariuki was also privy to Mzee's discussions. He noted how he interacted with his henchmen from Gatundu and how he plotted against his opponents. JM noticed how Kenyatta preferred to deal with people from his inner circle, the family. He noticed how his inner circle was also from Kiambu. Kariuki witnessed Kenyatta's underhand dealings, and even though some benefited him, the level of respect to Mzee went down. The familiarity led to contempt. The contempt led to JM's pride. And from the pride, the fall. Young, close to power, and amassing wealth. That is how Kariuki viewed himself. Cocky, brute, and drunk with entitlement. That is how the family viewed him. So his tenure as the president's private secretary came to an abrupt end, marking the beginning of his troubles with the family. This dismissal set off a chain of events that would entangle him in a web of power struggles and intrigue, leading to his ultimate downfall. The 1 millionaire among 10 million beggars. So why would Kenyatta kill his own son? Because Kariuki became the prodigal son, but he never returned to seek forgiveness. Yet, JM Kariuki was the first to betray Kenyatta. Let me explain. See, from 1963, after Kenya had gained her independence, it was time for the Kenyan elite to profiteer from the opportunities that were to arise. And Kariuki, being next to Kenyatta, literally got a lot of it. How could the glitz miss him? He was made an assistant minister for agriculture, working under Bruce Mackenzie, one of Kenyatta's mercenaries. At that time, the Kenya government, with the help of the British government, set up the Settlers Fund Trustee, a fund to help indigenous Kenyans buy private land from the exiting Europeans. But instead, the fund was grabbed up by the elite, Kariuki himself getting 1,000 acres of land in Olkalau. It was called the Riverside Farm, and another 200 acres in Gilgil. He called it the Kanyamwi Farm, an acronym for his Kariuki, Ka, and his first two wives, Nyambura, Nya, and Mwikali, Mwi, Kanyamwi, and many other land parcels. Secondly, Kariuki became the chairperson of the NYS. The National Youth Service was supported by the Israeli and the Chinese governments. Millions of shillings in funding went through Kariuki. Third, as Kenyatta's private secretary, he was tasked with mobilizing funds for party functions like elections. Kariuki and other members of a delegation selected by Mzee went to fundraise abroad. The funds flowed like a river. And for many years, Kariuki was able to keep a sizable chunk. And fourth, Kariuki became the chairman of the Betting Control and Licensing Board. He was an insider gambler. He owned casinos. He owned racehorses. Illicit money was laundered in his casinos. Anyone who wanted to operate a casino had to go through him. This made him millions in the 60s. And fifth, he had the business acumen from his childhood. His businesses included beer distribution, mining in Kenya and Zambia, and sitting in the boards of numerous companies. JM Kariuki was a multi-millionaire before he turned 40, amassing his fortune during the 1960s. Yet, he spoke with a forked tongue when he accused the Kenyatta regime of Africanizing colonization by merely substituting Africans for Europeans, Kamau for Smith, Odongo for Jones, and Kiplagat for Keith. In truth, Kariuki himself had seamlessly replaced Gilby with Kariuki, becoming part of the very elite he ostensibly criticized. Then, after all this, in 1969, Kariuki joined backbenchers such as Bildad Kagia, Martin Shikuku, and Jean-Marie Seroney, and became known for expressing their populist grievances. He became a voice for all those excluded from elite politics, while he himself was a beneficiary of the system. Harambee, a populist's sacred card. Harambee. If we draw parallels, the 70s and today's politicians practice the same doctrine. Take JM for instance, a populist, a darling of the people and stinkingly rich. Now and then, he'd be in Harambee and contribute an insanely huge amount of money. He'd get adulations from the crowd and leave the meeting dearer to the people. Does this remind you of any politicians today? Harambee's was and still is a populist sacred card. Let me explain. A close cousin of poverty is ignorance. Though it might seem that poverty and ignorance are siblings, the existence of wealthy fools proves otherwise. Nevertheless, the majority of the impoverished population also wallows in folly. This nugget of truth is well known to politicians who exploit it to their advantage. Deliberately, they suppress knowledge, ensuring that the masses remain unenlightened. They take noble concepts like Harambee, the spirit of pulling and pulling together, and distort them for their own selfish gains. A study by one Anne Waiguru in 2002, titled Corruption and Patronage Politics, Harambees in Kenya, a correlation between corruption and politics was established. According to her paper, Harambees provide an avenue for people who steal public funds to legitimize themselves to the public. She further argues that in Harambees, the money trickles down from state coffers through politicians to the general public. In Harambees, the public is usually oblivious that they are being used to further a politician's career, and the use of Harambee's movement as a campaign vehicle during election time is an evolving phenomenon. She concluded that fewer and fewer individuals account for a larger share of money raised. These findings showed the 100 principal donors accounted for 16% of the reported contributions. Politicians accounted for 70% of the money contributed, and Kanu politicians back then accounted for 68% of the money contributed by the principal donors. 3 of the principal donors in the 70s were Jomo Kenyatta, Arap Moi, and JM Kariuki. In the early 70s, JM was the master of Harambees. Kariuki was known for his extraordinary generosity, having donated the princely sum of 80,000 shillings to public causes. Today, it would be approximately 8 million shillings. This was a stark contrast to the president's highest known contribution of 3,000 shillings to the Jomo Kenyatta College of Agriculture in Juja. JM is also on record for having contributed 25,000 shillings to Kuala Secondary School in 1970. Having amassed the vast wealth described earlier, he built his populist card with the act of helping the needy. The needy, or the 10 million beggars as he called them, thought his actions were God-sent, even saintly. And to great effect, he succeeded, much more than his fellow backbenchers who were also social defenders. Shikuku, Seronoi, and Rubia did not have the money steroid to develop the populist muscle like JM. But in truth, JM was the one millionaire around the 10 million beggars. This popularity was a big thorn in the flesh of the family. JM was winning the popularity war in his native Nyeri, in his adopted Nyandarua, and in his foundation Nakuru and parts of the Rift Valley. Had JM lived past the 2nd of March 1975, methinks he'd have caused the family more trouble. And although a reliable YouTuber, Kwatenge, a former intelligence officer, claimed that JM's death was accidental, but methinks it was just a different date than the date that the family had planned. could have been later or even earlier. See, in 1970, despite JM being an assistant minister, he had been banned from participating in public rallies. In 1971, he was even banned from celebrating his 42nd birthday. All provincial commissioners, district officers had been ordered not to allow JM Kariuki to hold any meetings in their jurisdictions. And in 1971, December, during a parliament session, the MP for Harambee South, Brown Suma, raised a motion for adjournment of parliament to discuss the frustrations that JM was going through. And in 1974, during the campaign, he was barred from campaigning. But were the bans on his Harambee increasing or decreasing pressure on the family? The plot. This is how the plot was hatched to eliminate JM. Let me explain. Immediately after his assassination, there was a public uproar, obviously. The public was begging for blood. To quench this unrest, Kenyatta ordered a parliamentary select committee to investigate the murder claims. The committee did their work and submitted their findings to Kenyatta on 3rd June 1975. Kenyatta read the report. It implicated so many people, some dispensable, some untouchable. Kenyatta had to remove the names of the members from the family. The edited report was released to Parliament and to the public, and it was widely publicized by the dailies. You can still find a copy on the internet. However, the American embassy in Nairobi had news on the deleted names. So in August, a report titled Kariuki Murder Report Release was presented in Washington. It showed the original names: Kenyatta's brother-in-law and Minister of State, Bio Koinange, and Kenyatta's rogue bodyguard, Ada Wanyoike Dongo. Now, understand, the family needed an enforcer, and that was him. Ada Wanyoike Dongo, Kenyatta's private bodyguard, his favorite lapdog, and his supposedly hitman. Same man that years earlier JM had arranged to go overseas to be trained. The people that were adversely mentioned included Ben Gedhi, the commandant of the GSU. He was a close friend to JM Kariuki, but he also answered to Bio Koinange because he was the Minister of State. The GSU, or the General Service Unit, was the militarized wing of the police. The GSU, known to the commoners as Fanya Fujo Uone, are the first respondents to internal security matters. Therefore, their boss, Ben Gedhi, had the ear of the president. Then there was the police, the CID, and the police reservist. One police reservist in particular was Patrick Shaw. He operated beyond the playbook. He had a knack for killing bank robbers, hijackers, and hardened criminals, Chuck Norris style. Some even coined wits in his honor, like, on the seventh day God rested, then Patrick Shaw took over, or Patrick Shaw stands up faster than anyone can run. His operations included car chases, gunslinging, and public spectacles. He had a custom-made Volvo to fit his gigantic frame. He was 6 foot tall and weighed 140 kilograms. His Volvo, white, had the unique registration KFH 845. Lastly, there were the cashews, the foot soldiers, those who got their hands dirty, the hitmen, Mwangi Mahinda Gisheru Njau alias Mlachake, and Pius Kifadhi alias Mark Twist. These three at different times had planted 3 bombs across Nairobi city, all targeting JM. The family had wanted JM to be a target of a terror attack and didn't really care about the collateral damage. They knew JM liked the soft life, partying, gambling, and women. So all the 3 bombs targeted each of his 3 vices. The first bomb was planted in the washroom of the iconic Starlight nightclub. Iconic then, as it hosted the top cream of celebrities and politicians. JM not only was he a patron, but also an investor in that club. So that night in February, the planters hoped that JM would be in the club. But he wasn't. The second one was planted at the Tour Information Center, apparently by a group called Maskini Liberation Organization. The group was a propaganda gimmick by the family to associate JM Kariuki's popularism with a guerrilla violent wing. The bomb was aimed at achieving 2 things. 1, to eliminate JM, who would be gambling at the nearby Hilton Hotel, and 2, to implicate JM as the head of the Maskini movement. The CID used one of the criminals, Kifadhi, to try and call JM while being recorded by the CID. The criminal was literally trying to twist JM's words to implicate him in the Maskini liberation movement. The third bomb targeted his appetite for the fairer sex. JM had planned to take a bus to the coast to escape the madness in Nairobi. JM had tickets for 2. One was for his date, Elizabeth Koinange, no relation to Bio Koinange, and the other one was for him. The Mombasa-bound bus would leave the overseas trading company, OTC, at Racecourse the next day. It never did. Instead, a bomb ripped the bus apart, killing 27 people and wounding 100 others. But JM and his date were not among the dead or the wounded. Why JM never boarded the bus was relatively unknown in the early years. It is known now that JM's friend, one Isaac Masharia, dissuaded him from going to Coast, saving his life for at least another day. An unclaimed body of a gangster. The bomb exploded in Nairobi OTC on a Saturday, the 1st of March 1975, while JM was attending a party at a friend's house in Karen. He left the party at 11 p.m. In less than 24 hours, Kariuki would be dead. Let me explain. At 1:30 a.m., JM went to a casino and met with his friend, Ben Gedhi. Gedhi had insider information that the security forces were closing in on him and wanted to charge him with the 3 bombings that had rocked the city. JM Kariuki agreed to meet the police, but requested Gedhi to help him with a pistol, for just in case. Gedhi promised to deliver the pistol the following morning. So, 10 a.m. Sunday, 2nd March, Gedhi delivered the pistol to JM Kariuki. He found him asleep, so he went to his bedroom, briefed him, and slipped the gun into his hands. Then, at 11:30 a.m. at the CID headquarters, a call was placed to JM's house. On the line was one of the paid hitmen, Mark Twist. The call was being recorded. Mark Twist called and told JM that the bombs and the Maskini organization had worked. JM scolded him and asked him never to call the line. He knew he was being set up. 2:30 p.m., JM went to the Gong race courses. He had horses that were competing. He placed his bets and sat on the stands. Ben Gedhi joined him again. Gedhi informed JM that the security organs wanted to question Kariuki that evening. So, At 6 p.m., JM went home, took a shower, changed into some evening clothes, and went to the Hilton Hotel. He had dinner and coffee. At 8 p.m., Ben Geddy joined him. Geddy whispered something to JM's ears. They stood and walked out of Hilton. The two men walked to the special branch headquarters at Kingsway House in Mwindibingu Street. Geddy and JM entered the building through a back door and headed for the office of a senior special branch officer. In the room, there were the senior officer himself, Kenyatta's rogue bodyguard, Tongo Wanyoike, the NYS director, Warohio Itote, the CID director, Derry, and the two white police reservists, Patrick Shaw and Young. At Kingsway House, JM was questioned by Derry and Shaw on the bombings. "Are you the leader of the Masikini movement?" They asked the sarcastic question. They knew too well that there was no such a movement. Kariuki brushed it off with an even more sarcastic laughter and proceeded to school the room with a long lecture. Kariuki answered all the allegations raised by Nderi and Shaw until the two appeared satisfied that he had nothing to do with the bombings. Dongo, who remained silent, then took over the questioning. He wanted to know why JM had been going around the country insulting Kenyatta. "Kwa nini kila mahali wewe unatusi mzee? Wewe ni nani?" Dongo was furious. JM denied that he had ever insulted Kenyatta and that all he had talked about was social justice for all wananchi, which was quite in line with Kenyatta's beliefs. Dongo, with a vengeance voice, continued with his interrogation. He asked JM to account for some money he allegedly received for scholarships while serving as a private secretary to Kenyatta. "Hii pesa unapeana kwa Harambee, si ni ile uliibia mzee?" The tone had changed. Dongo was aggressive. Itote, who had worked closely with JM at the NYS, weighed in and talked of money from the Chinese government, which JM had allegedly received on behalf of the service. The exchange between JM and Dongo became heated. "Dongo, wewe ni mwizi mjinga." Kariuki, "Wewe ni mjinga wa kuzaliwa." Dongo lost his temper. He jumped from his seat, swung his right clenched fist and punched JM viciously in the mouth. 3 of his lower teeth fell down. Instinctively, the bleeding JM reached for a pistol in his pocket, the same gun he had been given by Geddy that morning. But Geddy, the only person in the room who knew JM had a gun, was quicker on the draw. He whipped out his service revolver and shot JM in the upper right hand. JM's pistol fell down. Geddy kicked it out of reach. He was protecting Dongo, Kenyatta's bodyguard. Dongo was surprised, but he was able to hide his surprise and stood up quickly, ready to punch JM some more. Geddy held him and led him to a corner that had a foam. As JM collapsed in a pool of blood and tried to find his teeth, Dongo phoned Bio Koinange to inform him of what had happened. Then Dongo signaled the 3 hitmen who had been waiting in another room: Pius Kefadhi, Mark Twist, Mwangi Mahinda, MM, and Gishero Njao, Mlachake. He ordered them to handcuff JM and take him to a car downstairs. The 3 had been brought to the Kingsway House by the CID officer Nderi to give evidence on JM's alleged involvement in the city bombings. But now, since the plot had changed, orders from above dictated that they had to end JM. The vehicle into which a bleeding and wailing JM was burrowed into was a green Peugeot station wagon with a red inscription, Meat Pack. It was a butcher's car. It transported meat from Gong to Nairobi. JM, writhing in pain and in the boot of the station wagon, must have known that his end had come. He had Dongo give instructions to the 3 hitmen. Deal with him. Feed him to the hyenas. Then JM had the 3 enter the car, start the engine, and started heading away. As the car turned onto Gong Road, the shadow of Dongo vanished into the night, leaving JM at the mercy of the 3 hitmen. Trapped in the dark, blood-stained trunk, remnants of previous horrors clinging to the metal, he fought to stay upright. His pleas for mercy fell into an abyss of silence, punctuated only by the flicker of matches as 3 men chain-smoked, indifferent of his suffering. JM's heart pounded as he began to pray, seeking solace in the darkness. But the searing pain from his wounded heart made it impossible to form the sign of the cross. Desperately, he whispered 3 Hail Marys. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Pray for me, now and at the hour of my death. In the suffocating confines of the trunk, a bleak wish took hold, the wish for death to claim him swiftly. The car's journey came to a halt, leaving JM on the precipice of fate, teetering between despair and more despair. They had reached the Gong Forest. JM had lost so much blood that he was slipping to and fro unconsciousness. They bundled him from the station wagon. They forced him to kneel down, not to beg for mercy, but to meet his death. Each of the 3 hitmen fired a shot. Mark Twist fired 2, instantly killing JM. Mlanchake fired 2 to make sure that JM was dead. Mem fired the last one to make sure that he was an accomplice. Days later, JM's body was discovered and taken to the city mortuary. The mortician was instructed to remove a further 3 teeth from his lower jaw. His mouth now had 6 lower teeth missing, 3 from the jab by Dongo and 3 that the mortician had removed. His body had 5 bullets still lodged in it. The family hoped that the body would be hard to identify. And for all of JM's faults, for all his heroism, for all his statesmanship, his final identity was reduced to a cruel epitaph by the mortuary attendant who had the gall to place a tag on his lifeless form that read, "An unclaimed body of a Luo gangster." For more of such untold stories from our history, join this channel by subscribing. Also, comment your views and any other stories you'd like to see. And for all your continued support, I am grateful. Until the next one, this is Jeph, signing